This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast. And this episode has been a long time coming. My guest has been a little bit reticent to come on, but I finally managed to persuade him because I think he's got a really compelling story to share with you all. And I got to know Darren probably the most stressful time in anyone's life during 2020, and he's somebody that I hold in very high esteem, and I think you'll hopefully all really enjoy getting to know him today. So our lovely global community, this is Darren Brown, and he is a director at Brookwood Recruitment. How are you today, Darren?
I'm very good, thank you, Leisha.
Very pleased for you to join us today. So a lot of people won't know who you are. They'll be avidly clicking away on LinkedIn to have a look at you and your company. Yeah. So for those who are not yet familiar, just give us a potted history as to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I run my own recruitment business. Prior to that, I'm one of many that worked for the famous SThree brand for 15 years. I worked for Huxley, one of their brands, across multiple divisions in Birmingham. And during that time, that's when I started getting a taste for international markets. So yeah, I did that, lasted 15 years, which was really good going. Then moved to a smaller business, set up an international business for them. Did that for a couple of years, and then got the itch to go off alone and set up my own international recruitment business. So yeah, that's me.
Well, it's very good potted history. That I have to say, that was very succinct. And yes, Darren is absolutely right. There will be a plethora of people in our audience who have also incubated in the phenomenal SThree brands. I think a large number of sort of modern day leaders have probably come through the ranks of SThree. I actually nearly joined SThree. I don't know if you know that. I think I might have told you at the time.
Yeah, you told me.
But we nearly worked together because I was offered by Huxley in Birmingham and offered by Primetime in Birmingham, and I decided to go for Primetime instead. So there you go. We could have been working together, Darren. Yeah. I'd have been all over you. I was very competitive recruiter back in the day. Well, thank you for that explanation. And actually, that was a very poetic way to sort of lead into sort of the starting point of this conversation, which is, you launched a recruitment business in the height of a global pandemic. First of all, why then? How did you go about doing it? And then talk to us a little bit about, building out that international piece.
Yeah, I think so. I was working for a company where I lived in Stafford. It was at the point where, COVID had just happened, and we had to make several people. I think I had 6 people in my team. Had to get rid of 4 people, so I was down to 2 people. And I just got to the point where I thought, do you know what? It left a bit of a bad taste how things happened and stuff like that. I'm not blaming anyone in my previous business at all. Think everything happened for a particular reason, but I just thought this is for me. If I'm ever going to do anything, now's the time. The markets have completely crashed, and I thought if I was ever going to be successful, then setting something up in conditions like that. There was no option for failure because that was the time. So a few months prior to that, that's when I, became a full-time single dad to at the time, my 4-year-old. And that massively changes your outlook on life, your priorities. So I also I didn't really get as much flexibility working for a company to be a full-time dad. And I know lots of things have changed now because of COVID, with flexibility, etc. But at the time, that wasn't the case. No. So that was a big part of it as well, was to get more flexibility, to spend more time with not just my 4-year-old at the time, but I had other children as well. So yeah, that was the kind of reason for doing it. Like we spoke, Leisha, obviously I looked at a couple of options through you, and then an ex-SThree director I had a great relationship with. I had a meeting with him. He offered me an amazing opportunity to be a part investor in me, and he's now an amazing business partner that just coming up to 2 years that I've been doing it has taught me an awful lot, and and has been a great help. So so that's why I did it. I did it for, and those were the reasons for a better work-life balance, but also I just thought it was if I was ever going to do it, because I think when you've been in recruitment for like 17 years, you get approached all the time about these opportunities that, why don't you go and do it for yourself? You make more money, etc. The decision was never about money for me. It was more work-life balance, but also the ability to create my own culture. And create a company where I could determine, what that culture looked like. But also, do it with someone else, and having my investor, my business partner alongside me to do that. And haven't looked back.
No, and I love that. And I just on a number of things there. First of all, it just goes to show that there's no sour grapes, that you didn't take any of my opportunities, but I just thought I'd leave that little rec joke hanging there. But no, on a serious point, I think first and foremost, any parent listening, and we are going to come back to this majorly within the topic today, but we'll just pause that for a second. You do sometimes feel a lot braver as a parent. You're prepared to do a lot more in terms of putting your feet forward and just going for it, because you've got mouths to feed. It's as simple as that. But actually, if you look at some of the most successful brands, not just recruitment here, but the most successful brands on the planet, they were launched in recessions. They were launched in downturns in the market. And actually what they do, and what you've clearly done, is you seize the opportunity because you've got nothing to lose. So I think if I look at some of, like yourself, and, we've had Carl on from Ambition, and, actually a lot of SThree people, funnily enough, you've all done something at a time when most people have gone back into their little cocoon and gone, oh my God, we need to protect the money. We need to stay safe. And so maybe it takes a certain type of person, maybe, I don't know, but I think, I really applaud you for doing the right thing for you and your family at that time, and clearly for your clients as well.
Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt. So coming back to, one of the main reasons I wanted to invite you on today is that a lot of people aren't necessarily always happy to talk about their personal situation, but for you, as it is for me, your main driver, as you've just said there, was creating a work environment for yourself where you can not compromise being a dad. So just talk to me what life is like as a single dad, because it doesn't often get talked about. What it's like.
Yeah, it's tough. It's extremely tough. Like, I think what makes it even more difficult is, I do football coaching, so I coach 2 different kids' football teams. So both my 6-year-old's team, I coach his team. I've got a 14-year-old, I coach his football team. So I do that alongside running my own recruitment business, etc. So life and being a single dad, and with my youngest living with me full time, it's tough. But the great thing about it is, I drop my youngest off to school every single day. I pick him up from school every single day. You can't buy that. There are so many parents, people that miss out on doing the small things. And I didn't realise, especially with my older ones, because I never got to do that with the older ones. I didn't realise how much it meant to children for a parent just to drop them off at school. Yeah, it means a huge amount to them. So being able to do all of that and still be successful, I think it has been huge for me, because it's my business. I'm smart enough to know, right, okay, well, if I'm dropping, my little boy off in the morning, and if I'm picking him up, then, because I'm working US hours, when he's in bed, I'm working. So it works perfectly. I'm not going to say it's not tough, because it is. It's extremely hard, but I think when it's your business, that drive to make it happen, to push through the low points, because there are many low points when you are single, not just a single dad, single parent, when things get on top of you. Kids are kids, and they'll test you, and and when you're trying to deal with that, as well as trying to deal with work situations, and you don't have a partner or someone to fall back on for support, and my family all live down south. I don't have any family support up here, so it it's hard work, but the rewards the non-monetary rewards that you get from it, I think, far outweigh anything else.
Of course they are, and speaking as a fellow solo parent, I applaud you, because it's bloody hard work, and I'm going to come back to some of the emotional side of it in a minute, because I think it's important that a lot of what you said there doesn't just apply to leaders; it applies to anybody listening now. Who, we know that you're all in recruitment, whether you're a recruiter, whether you are a leader. Actually, what Darren's saying is very similar to what most working mums will say, in that you're trying to be everything to everybody. It's not always possible, but the value, that the sort of beauty and the intangible gain that you get from dropping your child off or picking them up or being there when they're reading at night, we can get so much from that, but we don't want to compromise, I guess, either job. So do you get working dad guilt? Because working mum guilt's a very real thing. So is that still the same thing for you?
Massively. Massively. And there are moments when when I pick him up from school, and I spend time with him after school to do things, but there are times when I pick him up, bring him straight back home, I've got to jump onto a call, etc. And especially when you say, "Oh, Dad, can we go and play football outside?" and stuff like that, I can't. And you do get the massive guilt, but that you're doing it for the greater good, and
you are.
It's the balance, and I know one day he'll understand that everything that I was doing was for him.
He will. And as the parent of older children, my children are almost just short of 18 and 15, and they know that if I'm on a call, it could be worth a huge amount of money, and actually I have to make that call, as in literally make the decision as to whether or not that call is worth more than what they're asking of me, or whether it can just wait, because usually it's probably not anything urgent. It's probably just, can you stick some money on my GoHenry? But joking aside, so let's give some practical advice here, because as I say, I can't ever remember listening to a podcast across all the channels that I listen to where it's coming from a dad's perspective. So what practical advice would you give to our listeners who are, it might just be one person, in terms of whether you're a leader or whether you're a recruiter?
I think for me, a lot of it is to do with, a lot of it comes down to people like team leaders, sales team managers, and just, I think sometimes it gets made a lot, not just in recruitment, but we tend to, when people have children, we just tend to assume they're in a couple. There's two people, and in a lot of cases, that's not the case. There are so many single parents out there, and I think it's people like the immediate managers just being more aware of what they can do to support these people. And it could be, the small things like allowing them to drop their little the youngest the children off to school in the morning, allow them to pick them up from school, if it's not every day, even to give them that flexibility, because those are the small priceless things that means more to a parent than giving a monetary incentive. And I think as recruitment leaders, we always think that offering monetary incentives is the key to happy staff, and that's not the case at all. I think back years and years ago that might have been the case, but I think a lot's changed, and COVID has certainly made parents more aware of the time they spend with their children. And so I think if leaders can be more inclusive with their incentives, and and really understand what single parents want, and if they're off, I think there's always, when you organise nights out and things like that, I remember back in my SThree days, the pressure that you got to go on a night out, and if you didn't, but you've got to understand, when you've got single parents, they don't have a partner at home to look after the child while that, it's difficult for them. So, don't put as much pressure on them to go out. Obviously ask them, but don't that kind of make them feel guilty for not, coming out with the rest of the team, etc. Because it is difficult, and people are trying to balance, trying to raise a family, and
I think it's really, really practical advice, that actually, and without alienating, there'll be lots of people listening that aren't parents, maybe will choose to never be parents. We actually are talking about caregivers generally, And to be truly inclusive as a leader. And if you're listening to this and you're looking at your employee thinking, well, no, it's always about going out and getting drunk on a Friday night. Actually, I don't want to do that either. That there's a narrative, isn't there, that we should be doing more to listen to people as to what they actually want, what's more meaningful. And actually, is having a day off a better incentive so they can go and ride their horse, go and do the bungee jump, go and spend time with their kids, or go and spend time with their family. So I actually think it's so impactful coming from you, Darren, because you're a leader, you've worked in big corporate teams, and you're speaking from personal experience. And I really appreciate you being so honest with us about it. I think it's really important and so simple for leaders to roll out, and it doesn't cost you anything to say that go and have a day.
Exactly. It's just the small things, and it's just being mindful of, and that the people, whether it's single parent or caregiver, that these people just, you do need to give them that flexibility.
No, it's really good. And I really think that you being brave enough to speak out like this, because I know that you're showing vulnerability here, if it just impacts one listener to have the confidence to go and speak to their employer to say, actually, I'm really struggling. I'm on my own. I've not got any family nearby. Even if they have got family nearby, they will still feel isolated, guilty constantly, because you're either feeling guilty in work that you're not with your kid, or if you're with your kid, you're feeling guilty that you're not in work. Yeah. That is the Mariella Frostrup famous quote that you're not winning to anybody. So it's so important to start getting people to talk about it that aren't just very vocal single mums like me, for example. We need to hear from more dads, more caregivers who are saying, actually, it's really tough, really, really tough. So let's do more to be kinder to people. And I think that what COVID did was it did start to make people really think about what actually was important. And you know what? We do go to work to earn money, but that's not as important as feeling content and safe in work.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it's really good. So going back to your business, there will be a large portion of people that will have tuned in because you run an international business. And as we sit here in a UK recession, who knows how big the iceberg is? We just don't really know yet. We know we're in for a long haul because it's going to last as long as the war does, probably in Ukraine. What would your advice be to people thinking of going globally with their business? Because UK market will probably be quite challenging for a significant period of time. What would the must-dos be?
I think the instant attraction, certainly to the American market, is the money that you can make. The fees are extremely high, the margins that you can make are extremely high, etc. But I think it's really important to understand that the kind of the why as to it can't just be about money. Why do you want to conquer America? Why do you want to go into the American market? Because there's so many people trying to do it. If it's just purely money focused, you won't be a success. You've got to have, and I think when I first started doing international stuff, I completely, especially America, didn't realize how big the country was. I mean, some of the states are bigger than multiple European countries put together. It's such a huge area. And I think if you want to break into international markets, and I'm specifically talking about the US because that's where I do most of my business, I think you've got to go with a real good, you've got to have a plan, attack, look at, which states to attack, because just going and saying, I'm going to work across the whole of the US won't work. It's too big. You've got to really plan it. If you're, so I'll give you an example of my market. So mine's purely focused around the automotive industry. So I do most of my business in Michigan, which is nowhere near one of the biggest US states, but there's more than enough business in Michigan for me to grow a very successful, recruitment business. And I think, so yeah, people just need to plan it out. There are lots of there's lots of advice out there. There's lots of seminars that you can look at to get advice on where you should go in your markets. But yeah, plan before you, don't just go into it and be a busy fool, because it won't work.
Definitely not. And just to validate, if you go back in our archive, we interviewed Lindsay Hartland of Hanneston Green about a year or so ago. You must know Lindsay. He's in your neck of the woods.
My ex-boss.
There you go.
My ex-boss. Yeah.
And he came on, because I met him on the Hoxo Academy in 2020. We became really good chums, and he very kindly came on to talk about what you just said there. His whole sort of sort of, I guess, advice, and the whole podcast piece was about how to go about doing this. And he obviously has a very niche within one little part of America. And he said exactly the same thing you said. So it's the key to globally looking at whether it is America, or whether you could look at Europe, or whether you could look at Asia. You've got to do your research first. You've got to see where that niche is going to be before you even set out. Don't just go blanket approach.
Yeah, you complete me and like, I've got so much respect for Lindy. Like, he's my old boss, and we spent loads of time together. But he set up around the same time as me, setting up, and, you know, and when we taught loads. And you know, it's exactly right. Stay niche is. Some people think that being niche means that you've got less to go at. That's completely the opposite.
Absolutely nonsense. It's nonsense.
Exactly. It just makes you. And I think that's. People have just got to take that approach and just plan out. You don't just want to do it because there's loads of money out there. You've got have a plan, have a reason why. There's got to be another reason why you want to do it. Oh,
don't ever just chase the money in recruitment, guys, if that's what you're thinking, without a shadow of a doubt. That's really good advice, and we'll definitely tag Lindsay in this post then. I forgot that he was your boss. I forgot about that. Such a small world. So what's coming up for your business next year? What can we look forward to?
Yeah, so I'm off out to the US in October for 10 days. And then next year, so the plan will probably be back end of next year, we'll be looking to open first office in Tampa, in Florida.
Wow.
And then the reason we're choosing Florida, like it makes sense in so many different, you know, it's not too far from where a lot of my business is, but, you know, it's got that family feel to it as well, that, you know, if I wanted to go over there for periods of time with the kids, etc. And, you know, the plan would be to get staff from the UK relocating out there, but also mixing that in with, you know, because you can't have a successful US business with just people relocating from the UK. You need to integrate for longevity, because otherwise it won't, you know, I don't believe it will be a success. So that's the plan. Yeah, the plan will be to get the headcount in the UK up to 10 people next year. We'll soon be at 3 this year. And then, there's going to be a real big push.
The magic number of 10. There'll be lots of leaders sat there going, "Go for it, Darren."
Exactly. So the hard work is really starting now, and next year's going to be exciting.
But you've got the foundations, and it's just brilliant, and I'm so proud for you. I really am. Obviously, I feel like, even though I didn't know you for most of your recruitment career, I feel like I've watched the last 2 years with absolute pride, and, you know, you just do it with real integrity as well. And I love the fact that you don't seem to externally be compromising. I love that you're talking about this. So I really appreciate you sharing this with us today for the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.